Loneliness in the modern world is often manifested in subtle, cunning ways. It does not always appear as blatant sadness or dramatic solitude. More frequently, it exists in the quiet spaces between individuals, in the gap between what is said and what is meant, and in the space between being present and truly being known. Even while being surrounded by people or immersed in our daily lives, we can find ourselves profoundly isolated with ourselves and our own quiet stories. This emotional and existential space is exactly where Kieślowski's Three Colors trilogy, the films Blue, White, and Red, finds its narrative and thematic depth. While the trilogy is commonly associated with the political ideals of the French tricolor, liberty, equality, and fraternity, Kieślowski's work goes against a simple interpretation. Instead of delivering a straightforward message, he chooses to reflect these concepts through deeply personal and introspective stories. Each film is an exploration of isolation as experienced through individual lives shaped by grief, humiliation, and longing. In Blue, we follow Julie, a woman shattered by the sudden loss of her family. Her grief leads her to sever all ties with the world. Her journey quickly becomes a meditation on whether detachment can offer genuine freedom from pain. In White, Carol, a man stripped of dignity and belonging, transforms his humiliation into a pursuit of control. His arc is less about reconciliation than it is about reasserting himself in a world that has labeled him as powerless. And in Red, Valentine's accidental encounter with a reclusive judge unfolds into a quiet exploration of empathy and fate. Their tentative connection challenges both characters to reconsider their personal understandings of what closeness and alienation really are. Kieślowski's trilogy invites us to consider the conditions under which people withdraw and what it takes to return. Even now, in our modern society, as we live in a world filled with digital connectivity, these films remind us that true connection is neither automatic nor guaranteed. It is something we must learn to seek for ourselves, with vulnerability and with intention. Blue doesn't begin with an event. It opens with what's missing. The car crash that kills Julie's husband and daughter is depicted with restraint, as seen with subdued sounds, delayed revelation, and very, very minimal emotional cues. This quietness that we are thrown into immediately sets the tone for the film. How grief in Blue is portrayed to be an internal, paralyzing, and private ordeal. Julie's response to this loss is not through outward expression, but instead with personal erasure. She quickly finds herself selling her home, distancing herself from her friends and acquaintances, destroying her husband's unfinished musical score. She isolates herself, seeking a life without her memories or emotional attachments. Through this, Julie literally says to her mother, "I want no possessions, no memories, no friends, no lovers. They're all traps." To her, the idea of liberty becomes synonymous with being alone. Yet, Kieślowski undermines this quest for detachment through the film's visual and auditory elements. The pervasive blue tint throughout the entire film mirrors Julie's emotional state, while reflections, such as seen on glass, spoons, and water, suggest the impossibility of true disappearance. Throughout the film, Julie is constantly seen at a distance, even partially obscured, as if the camera can't even reach her. And, in moments when silence becomes unbearable, the story is so strongly interrupted by music, and usually with a black fade. Fragments of the unfinished concerto haunt Julie, uninvited and unresolved in her mind. These musical intrusions are less about narrative progression, but more about revealing psychological truth within her and her story. Julie's grief can't just be cut out. It's always going to resurface until it's dealt with. The turning points for this film aren't really dramatic. They occur in small human interactions, such as an unexpected friendship or a little act of compassion. Eventually, towards the end of the film, Julie finally acknowledges the past and gradually begins to re-engage with the world around her. Not really out of obligation, but rather through the slow, reluctant return of her empathy. By the end of Blue, Julie's husband's score is finally completed, and Julie, for the first time, allows herself to feel, Not just the sorrow she's been struggling with for the entire film, but love. Her final expression, as seen behind a pane of blue glass, is ambiguous. But it's not numb anymore like it has been for the rest of the film. With Blue, Kieślowski shows us that real liberty isn't about shutting everything out. It's not about retreating to our own little corners or hiding away. It's about carrying the pain with you and still choosing to step back into memory, choosing to step back into music, and choosing to step back into connection. In contrast to Blue's mournful self-analysis, White adopts a tone of biting irony. It's Kieślowski's most comedic film, but it's a dark comedy. White follows the story of a man, Karol, who has been humiliated and stripped of his dignity, his cultural identity, and his romantic agency. As the film progresses, Karol eventually transforms into someone powerful, yet still spiritually diminished and alone. Karol begins the film in complete disempowerment. We find him unable to perform sexually, linguistically out of place in a country that's not his own, and legally overmatched. The film literally opens with Karol being discarded by his French wife, abandoned by the legal system, and pooped on by a pigeon. The first impressions we get of him, downtrodden and awkward, is absurd, but strangely deeply human at the same time. His journey back to Poland, in which he was stuffed in a suitcase and smuggled across the border, is symbolic of his dehumanization. He is seen to us and to those around him as cargo rather than a man. Yet, once he returns to his own home country, Karol quickly changes things around for himself. He turns from his humiliation and comes up with a scheme, eventually orchestrating a complex plan to fake his death and take revenge on his ex-wife. Kieślowski frames Karol's rise as both comedic and tragic. The tone is light, yes, but the implications of his story are heavy. Karol achieves everything: wealth, influence, control, yet remains emotionally impoverished, alone. The film's cold color palette reinforces his emptiness. Everything is bland, void of love and color, just like how Karol feels on the inside. His final breakdown, when he sees his ex-wife, Dominique, in prison through his doing, is the film's emotional climax. The man who worked to construct an elaborate shell to shield himself from vulnerability finally breaks as he's unable to bear the weight of his unresolved love and guilt. In the end, all of Karol's plots, defenses, and ambitions truly unravel, leaving only the raw, inescapable truth of his broken heart, his loneliness. Kieślowski doesn't treat equality as a legal or political issue. He treats it as an existential crisis. Without intimacy between individuals, between him and his girlfriend, leveling the field becomes meaningless. There's no point to equality. Karol's victory is empty, built not on justice, but on a desperate attempt to erase his own smallness in the world, to gain the love of his girlfriend back. And in the end, it's not enough to save him. Kieślowski's third film in the trilogy, Red, is the trilogy's most broad and spiritual entry. To me, the most confusing entry. It is a film about unseen threads between lives, unseen threads between moments, and between souls. Valentine, the protagonist for this film, and the judge she encounters exist in separate worlds, but their brief connection becomes a reflection of something deeper, the human desire to be known. Valentine is successful and surrounded by a lot of people that she cares about, people that care about her, yet she's emotionally disconnected as her relationship is deteriorating and her routines feel mechanical. Around the beginning of the film, she accidentally runs over a dog with her car, injuring it and subsequently adopting it. This is the catalyst for her meeting with the judge, a retired magistrate who spends his time creepily eavesdropping on strangers through an interesting computer setup in his house. At first, she's disturbed by him spying on other people, but as they speak more and more and grow closer and closer, their dialogue moves beyond judgment and into a strange sort of curiosity and relatability. This judge isn't a villain, nor a recluse in need of redemption, but he's a mirror to Valentine that reveals her own yearning for honesty and connection to other people. Red operates on a sort of parallel structure throughout the film as well. August, a young man whose life echoes the judge's past, as seen with faced unfaithfulness in their past relationships, walks through the same spaces and areas as Valentine, but is unaware of her and the others around him. The way Kieślowski edited the film draws lines between August and Valentine, not to unify their stories narratively, but to emphasize how often our lives intertwine with each other without our knowledge. How two central characters of a story may be right next to each other and not even know it. Along with that, this film's aesthetic is full of transparency, ranging from glass to reflections and to half-seen faces, which helps to create a sense that the world is both visible and unreachable. It is the most metaphysical of the three films, and the one most willing to suggest that human connection isn't only desired, but somehow destined. We can see this in the final sequence of the film, as a ferry accident strains thousands of people, with only 7 survivors. A barman, Valentine, August, and coincidentally, the main characters from the other 2 films, Julie and Olivier from Blue, and Carole and Dominique from White. Kieślowski doesn't at all explain this miracle either. He simply just allows this convergence to exist, and then ends the film. In this way, Red transforms fraternity into something way beyond fellowship. It becomes recognition, the belief that we are all part of something larger, and that our isolation isn't the end of the story. It's only the beginning. Kieślowski's Three Colors trilogy is a profound exploration on loneliness in its many forms. Each film centers on a protagonist who believes, at least for a time, that withdrawal from society will protect them from whatever pain they're going through. Julie seeks liberation through her emotional erasure. Carole seeks equality by taking control of his life. And Valentine seeks understanding and ends up finding it in the most unexpected place. All 3 of these characters and stories come to realize that isolation does not always result in a happy, safe ending for one story. Isolation usually turns out to lead to loneliness, distance, or even loss. While Kieślowski offers no simple resolutions to these existential crises he proposes, he provides something even more powerful: the recognition of vulnerability and how it is shared between different individuals. In these films, liberty, equality, and fraternity are not political ideals. They're emotional imperatives. To grieve and still choose intimacy, to suffer indignity and still choose empathy, to feel distant and still choose to reach. This is the quiet ache of what it is to be human, and this is Kieślowski's final offering, his greatest offering. A reminder that behind every face is a silent desire to be seen, to be known, and to ultimately be loved.